While the James Webb Telescope uses its infrared vision to explore the most distant and oldest secrets of the universe, we should not forget one thing. Some of the greatest cosmic mysteries are right on our doorstep. Although you might think that the moon has been thoroughly decoded by now, in reality, our constant companion still holds many unresolved mysteries for us. In fact, we can't even say with absolute certainty how our satellite was formed in the first place. But that's not all. In addition, gravity field measurements have revealed that a gigantic structure slumbers in the ground on the mysterious far side of the moon, which occasionally fuels the wildest speculations and theories. But are we really inevitably dealing with the hidden base of a full-blown lunar civilization here? Or can the existence of the lunar colossus perhaps be explained differently? Where the earthly view is limited, nothing stands in the way of the most adventurous myths and legends. Because basically, no matter how much we crane our necks, it's simply impossible for us to catch a glimpse of the mysterious far side of the moon from Earth. The reason for this is simple. Our natural satellite has a bound rotation, so it always presents the same side to the Earth. But why is that so? Well, in this regard, experts point out that our satellite has only gradually acquired this characteristic. Shortly after its formation, the moon actually rotated much faster. Over time, however, the Earth's gravitational pull slowed it down to such an extent that its rotational speed ultimately matched its orbital speed. In view of the coupled rotation, however, it's also obvious that for thousands of years mankind could only speculate about what is hidden on the far side of the moon. But, as we all know, today we have somewhat different means at our disposal for exploring the so-called dark side of the moon. However, we knew long before Chang'e 4, which in January 2019 became the first spacecraft ever to land on the far side of the moon, that in reality it's not as dark as is often falsely claimed. In fact, the dark side of the moon goes through exactly the same phases as the opposite side, just in the opposite order. And if we look very closely, we can even see the dark side of the moon, or at least the darker side. The area facing away from the Earth actually has a higher reflectivity than the opposite side, and every time the satellite presents itself in the sky as a faint new crescent, its far side is brighter than the front side at full moon. The term dark side, therefore, refers less to the fact that the far side of the moon receives less sunlight than the near side, but rather to the fact that for our ancestors, it embodied the great unknown for a long time. But for all the lunar phase parallels, it's undeniable that the two halves of the moon couldn't be more different in other ways. We have only known this since 1959, when the Soviet probe Luna 3 sent back to Earth the first images of the previously invisible area. Then as now, a cursory glance reveals that the dark Maria, the lowlands covered in solidified lava, make up only a few % of the surface. By comparison, on the Earth-facing side, the percentage of Maria is almost a third. At the same time, there are far fewer lunar mountains and grooves on the far side. And now experts believe they have finally solved the mystery of the different nature of the two sides of the moon. But more of that later, because first we should deal with another no less exciting report. Gravitational field measurements have revealed that the far side of the moon is home to a gigantic structure that presents astronomers with an equally gigantic puzzle. The mysterious giant structure, Hawaii is always worth a visit. Visitors to the 10,400 square kilometer main island, which gives the state its name, will not only find plenty of black sand beaches, but also the imposing volcanoes of Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. But what does an idyllic Pacific holiday paradise have to do with a spectacular discovery on the far side of the moon? Well, it's quite simple. Peter B. James of Baylor University in Texas is quoted as saying, "Imagine a pile of metal 5 times the size of the big island of Hawaii buried underground. That's about the size of the unexpected mass we discovered. But how did it happen, and what does it all mean? Well, to understand, we first need to look at the location of this unexpected mass. This is no ordinary spot on the moon's surface, but the South Pole-Aitken Basin, which is nothing less than the largest preserved impact crater in the entire solar system. It stretches for more than 2,000 kilometers. But how the brutal impact, which is estimated to have occurred 4.3 billion years ago, happened, and what effect it had on the young moon is still largely unknown. To shed some light on the moon's darkness and find out what the subsurface of the South Pole-Aitken Basin is made of, James and his team looked at data from the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory GRAIL mission. This mission sent 2 spacecraft to the moon in September 2011 to measure its gravitational field and anomalies to gain insights into the internal structure of our satellite. Scientists will combine the GRAIL data with those from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which will map the entire lunar surface in high resolution and measure cosmic radiation exposure. And as mentioned, the experts' investigation eventually revealed the existence of a gigantic mass anomaly hidden hundreds of kilometers beneath the South Pole-Aitken Basin. And we are really talking about a gigantic mass anomaly. Not only does it extend to a depth of 200 kilometers, but it also contains 2.18 quadrillion tons. To put that in perspective, that is about half the mass of the Earth's entire atmosphere. But the internet would not be the internet if it only looked for natural explanations. With the cautiously phrased, somewhat alternative background that we have never really been to the moon, and that it may even be an artificially created space station disguised as a celestial body, the idea of a hidden underground base for the moon's inhabitants did not seem far-fetched. Lo and behold, even the most conservative researchers still cannot say with absolute certainty what the real reasons for the mass anomaly are. Not surprisingly, their theories are not based on the work of an unknown lunar civilization, but rather on the metallic core of the asteroid that formed the South Pole-Aitken Basin billions of years ago. It could still be embedded in the moon's mantle. Indeed, computer simulations have shown that such an iron-nickel core could penetrate deep into the upper mantle during an impact without necessarily striking the moon's core. Furthermore, the immense weight of the asteroid's heart could pull down the bottom of the crater, causing it to sink an additional kilometer. An alternative approach explains the mass anomaly as a huge clump of dense oxides that accumulated at the moon's south pole as the original magma ocean cooled and solidified. Only time will tell which of the 2 hypotheses is more likely to be correct, and it's possible that the mystery of the subsurface structure will be solved by a manned lunar mission. Why the moon has 2 faces? The cataclysmic impact at the moon's south pole could not only have left behind a confusing mass anomaly, but could also be responsible for the drastic differences between the 2 halves of the moon. In addition to the aforementioned mass imbalance, researchers have now also discovered that the crust on the far side of the moon is significantly thicker than on the near side. At the same time, however, the crust of the near side is enriched with unusually high proportions of radioactive thorium, potassium, phosphorus, and rare earth elements. How this so-called creep terrain was formed, and what triggered the volcanism on the lunar surface is, however, equally unclear and controversial. Some researchers suspect that the reasons for the differences in crust lie in the tidal forces of the Earth. Others, however, consider it more likely that we are dealing here with the result of a devastating impact. Matt Jones from Brown University in Providence is one of them, which is why he and his colleagues investigated the question of how the enormous heat of the impact at the South Pole-Aitken Basin would have impacted the entire celestial body as luck would have it. The gigantic crater is located almost exactly at the point opposite the creep terrain. The reconstruction of the monster impact on the basis of geophysical models of the early lunar interior later showed that the impact could indeed have caused a thermal anomaly in the lunar mantle, which significantly influenced the development of the moon's interior for hundreds of millions of years in detail. The rendezvous with a 100-kilometer asteroid unleashed an extreme heat surge that spread through the moon's interior to the opposite side, ultimately also affecting the area known today for its many Maria and the creep terrain. In the process, titanium-rich magna accumulations were also swept towards the Earth's surface, just as a surfer follows a wave according to the simulation. The heat and subsequent mantle convection would have been enough to explain the special enrichment of the creep terrain and the basal rock of the Maria. But that's not all. The impact at the moon's south pole may have even paved the way for volcanism and the formation of the Maria in the first place. In fact, the event may also have concentrated heat-generating elements on the near side of the moon, and the interaction of radioactive heating and increased mantle convection could have literally fueled the upper mantle of the near side over hundreds of millions of years. Conversely, the hot magma could then also pour out onto the surface in the form of huge eruptions. According to the experts, the first eruptions occurred about 200 million years after the asteroid impact, while the most extreme chapter of Mare volcanism began another 300 to 500 million years later. In other words, the evidence is mounting that the South Pole-Aitken Basin and the nature of the moon's front side are directly related, and that one of the greatest mysteries in lunar research has finally been solved. And now it's your turn to crack the following riddle, what is located directly under our video just waiting to be clicked on by you. That's right, go ahead and click like and subscribe so you'll never miss a new video from us again. We'll see you soon.